everyone, welcome to the PyCharm FastAPI tutorial series. In this tutorial, we are going to implement REST APIs for our user module. Before moving forward, I need to speak about Pydantic and its benefits. You may be aware that FastAPI and Typer use Pydantic. What is Pydantic? Pydantic helps in data validation and settings management. It also enforces Python type hints during runtime. It's extremely fast and easy to use as well. If you've already worked with serializers in Django REST Framework and Marshmallow with Flask, then definitely you can compare their similarity with Pydantic. Pydantic also supports data classes. If you want the same kind of validation in data classes, use it in Pydantic instead of the Pydantic base model. Keep in mind that Pydantic data class is a drop-in replacement. Coming to benchmarks, Pydantic is very fast compared to other validation libraries. You can see that Django REST Framework is 12.3 times slower, and Marshmallow is 2.4 times slower. You don't need to install Pydantic separately, it's already bundled with FastAPI. Let me go back to the IDE and create a few files which I will explain their usage in a while. In the schema.py file, we're going to write our Pydantic models. Let me do the necessary imports. I will create a class user which imports base model. According to the Pydantic documentation, the primary means of defining objects in Pydantic is via models, and models are simply classes which inherit from base model. Next, I will define a few fields with their respective types. As you can see, we have created 3 fields: name, email, and password. Name is a constr, which is basically a constrained type. It's possible to define primitive types that have more constraints on their values. The str must have at least 2 characters, but a maximum of 50 characters. Email requires email validator to be installed. The input string then must have a valid email address. And finally, the password will be a normal string. If you're interested to know more about different types of validators, then it's already mentioned in the official documentation. You can check over there. As you can see, we can do a lot of things with Pydantic, like converting the lowercase, strip white spaces, and even regular expression pattern matching. Make sure to install the email validator, otherwise the email str will throw an error. Our schema has been successfully defined. Now switch back to router.py file. Once your application starts growing up, you might need a place for your path operations in a specific file like what we're going to do in our router.py file. This helps better organize your code and focus only on the user routes. We're going to import the API router and create an instance for it. I will also do the necessary imports apart from API router like depends, status, response, and HTTP exception, which will be required. I'm also going to do imports from SQL Alchemy, services, validator, schema, etc. Don't worry, for now I will be writing the implementation of the above files, which I mentioned like services and validator. As you can see on line number 8, we're going to create an instance of our API router. It's going to be prefixed with /user, and I will also provide a tag name, which helps in categorizing it easily. Let's begin by creating our first API endpoint for our user registration. I will create an async function create under user under registration in which I'm going to pass two parameters. One is a request, which takes in the user schema, the Pydantic model, which we defined earlier, and the second one is the database. If you don't mention anything about the database, it will accept it as a query parameter, which we don't want. The database is going to be a type of session, which comes from SQL Alchemy. If you now directly go and run it, it throws an error saying it's not a valid Pydantic field. To overcome that, we're going to use depends, which is basically a dependency injection provided by the FastAPI itself. We're going to inject the getUnderDB connection. As per the FastAPI documentation dependency injection, it means in programming that there is a way for your code, in this case your path operation functions, to declare things that it requires to work, meaning dependencies. This is very useful when you need to have shared logic, the same code again and again, share database connections, enforce security, authentication, role requirements, etc., and you want to minimize code repetition. I encourage you to check more about this in the FastAPI documentation. You can even create subdependencies and global dependencies as well. Moving ahead with our API creation, we need to first make sure to check whether email already exists in the database or not. If the email exists, then we won't allow the user to register again with the same address. I'm going to create a verify under email under exist function, which is going to take the email and database values. As you can see, if you type request, the IDE is giving support by showing different fields which can be passed. This is really great thanks to Pydantic. Looks like our function is not present. Let me take some help from PyCharm to create the function. Let me do the necessary imports. Email will be a string and database will be a session. Let me change database to DB under session, and that looks more clear to me. The function might return user or it might return none. Let me come back to the router. If a user exists, then I will raise an HTTP exception with status of 400 and a message. If the user doesn't exist, then I will move ahead and store the new record in the database. I will write the business logic in services where I will create a function called new under user under register. One thing I missed is that the function needs to be async. Async and await go hand in hand. Taking a little bit of a pause in the router at lines between 14 to 18, you might be thinking this validation could have been taken care of at the Pydantic level itself. But you shouldn't be performing any I/O inside Pydantic validators. I was also exploring in the beginning, and when I came across this interesting issue where there's discussion going on for Pydantic validation with the database connection, I will mention the link to the issue. You can go and check that out. Luckily, I got a chance to interact with Sebastian at PyCon India 2021, and to get rid of these issues, he built something called SQL Model, which you may have heard of recently. It is designed to be compatible with FastAPI, Pydantic, and SQL Alchemy. Do check out the SQL Model documentation, it's quite interesting. Coming back to PyCharm, let's move ahead with our register function. I'm going to do the usual necessary imports. The function is going to return a new user object. We are now going to commit and then refresh. Basically, db.refresh means to expire and then immediately get the latest data for the object from the database. It involves an immediate database query, which you may consider unnecessarily expensive. You can use the type annotation, it's not mandatory, but it's good to use because this is going to be the future of Python, where everything will be leading towards type hints. Also, the IDE does provide great support for type hints. So our router part is done. We now need to register the route in our main controller. Open main.py. First, I'm going to the two routes which were generated through PyCharm. We don't need this anymore. Let me give brief information to our API docs, and we can add more information. I'm just sticking to only the title and version. Now we need to include the router. I will type app.include under router. I'm going to import the user router and pass it in the include under router. Registering our router is done. Let's move ahead and start our server. Open the browser and navigate to Docs. Looks like I missed something. Let me check. Big mistake. I missed adding the router decorator to our function. It's going to be a post method pointing at the slash path, and the 201 status code will be returned in a response. Let me refresh the page. Yes, the register API is now visible. Thanks to Pydantic, the schema was generated very smoothly. Let me try out the API and try registering a new user. I will provide a name, email, password, and then click on Execute. Looks like something is wrong. I got an internal server error. Let me check what's happening. The issue is pointing towards the password. Okay, got the issue. Let me fix it quickly and try again. Yes, it works. Our user has been successfully registered. I'm returning the user model response. If you want, you can even return a custom response. Hope you enjoyed watching the video. In the upcoming videos, I will be focusing more on writing REST APIs for other modules. So stay tuned.